that was not the walk-up song that I had asked for. Maybe next time. It is great to be here. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Fenway Lab, for the invitation. Thank you, Senator, for being here. And it's nice to be back in the Kennedy Center. I have not been here since the Mark Twain Prize last year. Mark Twain Prize is an award for American humorists. And that event is very much like this one, except much, much funnier, much funnier. But we'll do our best nevertheless. Senator Rounds, you kicked us off last year as well, and I was struck at that time by both your recognition of the potential, the promise in some of these technologies and their applications, but also I was a little bit daunted by some of the potential threats, both the emergence of new threats to national security and otherwise, or at least the potential catalyst to existing threats. And when someone who is privy to classified briefings is nervous about things, I get very nervous. So why don't I just fast forward a year and just ask you at a high level to revisit how your point of view on these issues has changed?
I appreciate the opportunity, and it's early in the morning, but let's start out by just looking a little bit about where we've been and where we're coming and what we see happening. AI is here. It's not going away. And it's going to move even faster in the next couple of years than what it moved in the last year. So I don't think this is anything that people should look at and say, I'm going to be retired, I don't have to worry about it. It's here. But the opportunities that it presents, I believe, will outweigh the challenges that it will also bring along with it. So let's just talk number one. I think we have made some real strides in the United States in the last 12 months or so. The best example I can give is last year, Chuck Schumer, Todd Young, Martin Heinrich, and myself, we hosted a series of 9 different invitational seminars for members of the Senate and their staffs, really well attended, but we had great participation by the real players in the field of AI and technology, and the combination of what's going to happen to jobs, what's going to happen to financial services, what's going to happen in terms of defense and health and so forth. There isn't really any place where AI isn't going to touch us directly. It's going to impact us in all facets of our lives. So last year, as we were doing this, we started laying out, well, how do we respond to this? How do you regulate it? But how do you promote it as well? Because this is a competition between the United States and China, let's face it. And that drives a lot of the decision-making at the federal level. But this year, President Trump's plan here with his basically his action plan is very consistent with what Congress has talked about with a group of us that have worked together on our AI roadmap from the year before. And the consistency between the two makes me feel good because I think we're looking at the same things. You can't simply look at AI and say, you know what, we're going to slow this thing down. And if you slow it down here, it just simply means that the activity and the development moves to China. And I think that's got to be the background for the rest of the discussion that we have here. This is truly a competition between two superpowers. And the issue, if I can I'll take one thought on this and then lay this out because I think this kind of drives, for me anyway, the direction that we go with a lot of our stuff. In the 1990s, when we were talking about internet activities and these computer systems that were unique, and in the 1990s, it was really kind of coming on board. We talked about, well, were you a Mac guy or were you a Microsoft guy? And people were saying, well, it's going to be one or the other. It's going to be one, and it's going to work better in this side for this group, and for the office, it's going to be another one. And so most folks grew up on one of the two. Today, we have a similar thing when we talk about the development of AI and what the rails are that our systems are going to develop on. Well, you have one that is going to be developed with Western standards, one in which NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, and others have the say, or the one where China literally lays out the rails for the rest of the world in terms of what their systems are built on and what the developers, who are really the customers, get used to learning on and using. We can't lose that battle. So if you talk about who the developers are for AI and so forth, they're from all over the world. We want them to be using AI systems that are based on U.S. standards. And mark my words, we're there, we're getting there, we're moving faster, but never count China out. They understand, just like we do, how serious this issue is. They want the rest of the world to use their rails, their standards, where their systems are set up based upon what they're doing with Huawei. And so as I share with you today, think about that as kind of the background for what we have to do in the United States that impacts whether it's healthcare, fintech, financial services, whether you're talking the defense of our country, or you're talking the social media platforms that so many people are challenged with right now. I've talked long enough in one
That's terrific, and a terrific framing, I think, of a lot of the day, if I understand the agenda correctly. Let me pivot from sort of a top-down articulation of some of the objectives and talk about sort of the process. I mean, 2 summers ago now, as you mentioned, you and a group of bipartisan senators, so Senator Heinrich and Young
and Senator Schumer.
Right, published the AI roadmap. And I believe your ambition at the time was for pieces of legislation to proceed via regular order in the Senate. Now, one can say many things about regular order in the Senate. One usually does not associate it with blinding speed and urgency. But we are talking about the regulatory lattice work of an underlying industry that is moving with blinding speed and urgency. So how should one think about kind of progress from here?
Let's take an example. In the Banking Committee, we passed the Genius Act, which basically lays out the groundwork for how we want to monitor and work with stablecoins. The idea behind it is we want the development of stablecoins to use the US dollar as the sovereign backing it. So you now have the Genius Act, which is out and rolling. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than what we had before, which was nothing? The answer to that is yes. But that worked through regular order. The next one coming up will be one in which we talk about basically the marketplace and how we work, and we start looking at other types of digital assets as well, and what the marketplace looks like for those commodities that are out there. So it is working, and you're right, we work very slowly on a lot of this. But the fact that President Trump literally has directed his team to move this stuff along has been helpful, because where they can do executive orders and so forth, that kind of helps lay out the groundwork for what may work or may have to be modified for legislation that will then codify it and make it kind of the law of the land long term. So this has been helpful for us to have had kind of our roadmap, but then the action plan that the president has laid out is one with some really bright people that have actually helped to start moving that along. And the areas when we talk about this stuff, we're talking, what are we doing in healthcare? How are we going to move healthcare along? How do we put together the databases so that we have really good databases with huge amounts of data in them, but we don't invade the privacy of individuals that might have serious healthcare issues? What about in financial services? How do we work what we call the sandbox approach? Like, as an example, for the SEC, if the regulators aren't used to AI tools, how do they learn to regulate them unless there's a place where they can go and do a little bit of experimenting? But the same way with the companies that really want to get ahead of competition from the rest of the world, is there a way we can create these sandboxes, so to speak, where you can bring your tools in, and not only can the entities that want to create new ideas for consumer products and so forth, but allow that regulator to be able to learn how they're going to regulate it as well, and do it in a safe environment to where nobody's getting hurt, but both sides know that there's some protections, but it's a give and take to where you're not going to get into trouble by trying something new, as long as you stay within the sandbox. Same when we talk about workforce development. I mean, workforce development is going to be a huge part of the discussion. I'm convinced that while some people will say this is a change and you're going to destroy the workforce, I don't see it that way. I see a change in workforce very similar to what there have been in other revolutions in the past. So you're going to have people that are going to have different capabilities. But the one that stands to mind right away, just think about this for a second. Because of the development of AI and the need to actually create material facilities and so forth, the estimate right now is we're going to need over 155,000 more people every single year for the next 10 years, just in terms of people that can work with their hands, plumbers, heating and air conditioning, folks within the trades. And that number is going to continue to go up as we build more. And with AI doesn't come the need for less space. We're going to need more space.
Yeah. Let me talk a little bit, if I might, about preemption. I mean, as you know, I grew up in financial services. I've always believed in the wisdom of one national market with one set of rules, and therefore federal preemption. I know not everyone shares my enthusiasm for that. I get it. But at least in financial services, there are a set of laws passed by Congress that would preempt stuff. You can't necessarily say that here, and so I think there's a decent amount of concern that, well, how are we going to stop the states from doing stuff if we don't have Congress, congressionally passed legislation yet to preempt it with?
I think sometimes we underestimate the capability of states to actually do a good job for themselves.
As a reminder, the senator used to be a state legislator and a governor, so.
Look, I really do think the states are the laboratory where a lot of this stuff can happen, but you are correct. When it comes to interstate commerce, the founding fathers were very clear. There had to be a way for Congress to interact and to participate so that you had a consistency from one state to the other. I think that's as important today as it ever was, but let's not disrespect what the states bring to the table. Really bright people that know on a location-by-location basis what is of concern for folks in their area. And one of the areas is with regard to social media. It's their messaging out there that says, Congress, you're not doing a good job of regulating because we got kids that are at risk and you're not providing that safety net. Well, that's kind of like the warning sign. That's the shot over the bow saying, get your act together. But it's one thing to say we have a problem. It's another thing to know what you ought to do to fix the problem. With 50 states all looking at it, don't underestimate their ideas to be innovative and to come up with a solution that might very well work in Congress as we learn what works and what does not work in those multiple states that are trying it. Eventually, do we need to have very clear federal guidance on a number of those areas, particularly with regard to commerce and privacy and how social media interacts? Yes, but let's not undervalue what the states bring to the table. So am I like saying we have to stop those states from doing all this? Not right now. The states are telling us, you guys do a better job and then we won't have to do it. And I think that's the way we've got to approach it.
That's useful. Can I go back to something you were talking about before, which is about talent? And you were speaking about the specific example of the skilled trades having a shortage of something that rhymes with 150,000 people annually. But what about more broadly with respect to the technical skill associated with sort of the science of AI and AI applied to science? So I remember being alarmed back in, pre-pandemic in 2019, that something like 35 or 40% of new college freshmen did not have really even adequate high school level math skills. And between then and now, the problem has gotten much, much worse.
Yeah.
So how does one square that with the fact that we need mathematicians and computer scientists and statisticians at a scale that might dwarf what we have today?
It's a wake-up call for our education system, number one. These kids are capable, but if your system is not designed to teach them the basics, you better think about why that is. And I'll diverse a little bit, I'll change this a little bit. I'm one of the guys that says we ought to get rid of the Federal Department of Education. And the reason is not because I want to take money away from the states. It's because I think more of the decision-making and about how they lay out the plans state by state to actually improve on our math scores, which has not been going up for the last 20 years. It's time that we allow the states to actually figure out for themselves how to teach better than what they are today. So to begin with, the second piece on this is don't underestimate the next generation. I mean, look, these kids don't even know how to do cursive writing, but that's because we're not teaching them to do cursive writing. They could do it if there was a way to teach them to do it. But if you give a little kid that's 3 years old or 4 years old your phone and they can get into it, it won't take them long and they've gone through the entire thing and they know how to do it. I mean, look, these kids are bright. The next generation is going to grow up with an entirely different set of tools in their hands. I remember one of my kids, look, I've got 4 kids. The oldest is 45 and the youngest is right in that mid-30 range right now. And I remember the first time he looked in and he saw in an old barn, he saw a phone on the wall that was hung up on the wall. And he looked at it and he says, what is that? And I said, that's a phone. And he says, well, how does that work? And he picked it up and there's a dial on it. And I said, remember dial up? You're going to dial somebody up? No. Well, it was just, he'd never seen it, and I got thinking about it. These kids didn't have that. I mean, you know, they've had a computer in their hands all this time. They're going to be just fine. And in fact, they're going to know it. They're going to be able to handle it. Our job is to make sure that the standards that they're going to be working under are American standards, Western standards, and not ones that are dictated by a country that right now is an adversary. And so I'm going to come back to the same thing again. Our kids can make this work, but we've got to do some very basic things here to make sure that the frameworks that the developers work on are going to be things that they understand from a Western point of view today.
Well, I admire your faith in the next generations. I will tell you this story, which is not strictly speaking relevant, which is that when our eldest was learning how to drive, we would say, Cora, you got to slow down. Those cars are stopping. And eventually she asked, how do you know the cars are slowing down? She was unfamiliar with the concept of brake lights, like just a knowledge. So I'm going to reserve judgment on the capability of the next generation.
But you know, you asked something else on that, and part of this also is where are they going to be employed at? Look, they're going to know computer stuff inside and out. They've grown up with it. Everything they do is going to be on an application. They're going to pull stuff up. The banking that I do, I go down to the bank and I do stuff at the bank.
You're that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm that guy because I didn't want to have stuff electronically on the systems to get into my accounts, you know. And so, but my kids, it's all online banking, and it'll be any place in the United States. That's what they grew up with, and they know it. They get it, and they're not afraid of it at all. But they also give out a huge amount of personal information all the time, thinking, well, somebody's got us covered. And you go, you're putting stuff in there, and are you sure it's going to the right place? And they say, well, what do the bad guys care about me? I don't have that much money, you know. And you go, no, you don't understand. This huge amount of data out there is being collected by people all over the world, and it's being collected for a reason. It's like when you're on a phone, we get on the screens and we talk about what's going on in our daily lives and so forth, and in our companies, and we're on a screenshot with everybody else, you know, talking back and forth. Do they realize that there are people that can get in and listen to everything that you're talking about in your company? Because these are not secure. And so this is a case of where, you know, rather than having a private conversation or saying, let's take this thing and go to a private discussion on it, it's out and open, and they don't understand just exactly how serious the bad guys are about collecting as much data as they possibly can. And there's lots of bad guys out there. And they're in the internet systems, and they're in the AI systems because that's where the money's going to be at.
I mean, that is an admonition I think that people should take to heart. Based on my observation and eavesdropping on people on the Acela, people are not sufficiently attentive to privacy.
No.
If talent is one element of trying to...
Or for that matter, in an airport where you're sitting in a lounge and they start talking about all their business deals, and the guy in the engineering is talking about the deal that he's really got close. He's got $2 million to go on it, but the guy on the other side, he's got him underbid by just a little bit, but you know, and he's giving this whole diatribe out about his deal that's going on, and everybody's looking around like, does this guy understand he's just sharing this with the entire rest of the folks in the Delta Lounge, you know? I mean, it's just...
I should visit the Delta Lounge more often for stock tips. So if talent obviously is an important part of trying to allow this set of technologies to advance to its potential over time, so is energy. I mean, if anything, like right now, if you kind of fast forward, it would seem that energy production would be sort of the rate limiting factor here. And in particular with an eye towards China as the principal rival. I am not an energy expert, but it would seem that the trajectory for China, both in solar and nuclear, is rather different and rather better than ours here. How should we be thinking about energy as part of this entire equation?
It will be the limiting factor for us in terms of our ability to stay ahead of China in the AI race. We do about 1,350 gigawatts of capacity or capability for energy production in the United States. The AI folks, the AI developers tell us that between now and 2028, we're going to need between 150 and 200 additional gigawatts of power in the United States today. And we don't know how we're going to get there, bottom line. China will overtake us in terms of nuclear power by the year 2030. They are using probably double the amount of power that we are probably triple the amount of power that we are right now. And they are moving forward with power production at a rate that we're not even going to come close to keeping up with. I think it's time that we start talking seriously about how we address this. When we talk about, well, let's just get the regulators out of the way and run nuclear. Even if you didn't have a regulatory environment that was restricting the development of nuclear, you wouldn't have the ability to put turbines in place because you can't build the turbines fast enough to meet the demand on nuclear. And the same thing when you come to natural gas. Even if you unleashed all of the natural gas capabilities you've got, you don't have enough turbine capability to meet what the demand is going to be. And that's the reason why I think the administration has said their goal is an all of the above on energy development right now. I totally agree with that. And I mean, it's all of the above. It's not just wind power. It's not just solar. It is all of the above, any place that we can pick it up. But let's talk for 1 minute about what I think is the key, even longer term, that is not that far away from us. I'm convinced, and you're going to think I'm wacky up here, but I am convinced that space-based solar power is going to be a huge part of our future, and it's not generations away. We're talking 5 years, maybe 6 years, 7 years. But we've got the capacity right now to put significant amounts of satellite capacity in orbit today. We're going to have more as more and more of these companies come in and compete. The price of putting it in orbit is going to continue to come down. But once we're in orbit, you think about what you can do with a space-based solar system or a solar collection system. And then think about what you can do if you have power in space. Because if you're going to need AI systems, why leave the AI system here on Earth if you can put the whole system in space? And you eliminate a lot of the cooling challenges that you have here on Earth. While at the same time, you've got literally unlimited amount of power in space. Those are the types of things that we should be developing today so that in the next 5, 6, 7 years, we can meet the demand, this unlimited demand for power that we're going to need. And AI is going to take up a significant amount of that power demand.
I will admit I did not have space-based solar arrays on my bingo card for this morning.
And look, it's for real. China is doing it. China is trying it. They've talked about it already a couple years ago. I'm not giving out any classified information. I'm just telling you China has been working on it, and so have we.
What there will require sort of basic science advances to enable a lot of these ambitions to come through. And so I would invite you to talk a little bit about that Project ASAP and the RFI that you had put out with one of your colleagues.
We put out a request for information, and we did. Martin Heinrich and I did. And we've worked together on other stuff, and Senator Heinrich, who's on the Dem side, he and I have the AI caucus. And we decided what we really want to do is what do we do if we want to, we said, what if we want to accelerate the development of science, the rate at which science is being developed by a factor of 10 by the year 2030? Is that doable? We've had almost 200 suggestions about how to do that, 3 of which were, you ain't going to get it done. But the rest of them were all saying, here's the way you do it. So we've got a series of about, I think it's 8 or 9 bills of types of legislation that we're going to be introducing over the next couple of months as what we call our ASAP program, or our accelerated science approach to this project. And what we're finding is there's a whole lot of people out there that really do believe we can accelerate the development of science using AI and doing it now, getting it in and getting it rolling now. So I'm excited about it, but that's the plan is what do we need for legislation to make that happen? And when we talk about that, we're talking about science that literally, it doesn't have to be scary. Some folks are saying, geez, if you're developing this thing, who's going to look out and protect us against the people that are going to be putting in the fake pictures on the internet? You've got to have a better internet, you've got to have a better AI system to detect it than what the bad guys have got. You've got to stay one step ahead of them. We've got companies that can do that. The same way when it comes to healthcare, look, pandemics, we know they occur. We also know that bad guys, when they talk about biomedical activities, there's always bad guys out there that are looking at whether or not there's a way in which you can create a new threat of a pandemic. We know that, but we've got to be better than them because we've got to be able to come up with the solutions to stop that pandemic in its tracks. And so, once again, we've got to take one step ahead of where the bad guys are going to be at. And as we do that, those are job opportunities for the rest of our kids as well. The silver lining in that discussion about healthcare is what it will do for the quality of life, literally for mankind. We're not that far away from being able to literally, when we talk about diabetes, can you imagine what that does for healthcare if you can cure diabetes? And think about what that does for the federal checkbook when you don't have to deal with folks that have lifelong problems with diabetes. We're not that far away from curing the vast majority of cancers that afflict mankind. Think about what that does for the quality of life for an entire family. But think also about what that does for savings when it comes to the cost of health care for the federal taxpayer. And then go one step farther and think for just a little bit about what happens if we have a system of protecting our country that says to other countries, maybe it's time we get away from being adversaries once again, because the U.S. really is in a position to where they can protect themselves. And the AI system is there so that the chances of winning a war against the United States isn't there. Think about what happens if, by spending the money in the AI research and then agentizing it into weapon systems that are designed to defend, think about what that happens if you spend literally $100 billion, but you save yourself from getting into one war. One war. Because when we go to war, we don't talk about billions of dollars, we talk about trillions of dollars in cost. These are the things that AI will be a key to, not 10 years from now, but now. FinTech is a part of it. And what you're seeing in FinTech is going to be how you allow other people to literally invest and to safely invest, to make payments, and to do it in a way that has been part of science fiction in the past. So you're literally on the cutting edge, and you are using tools that Grandma and Grandpa didn't ever dream of seeing, and yet for those that are my age right now, and I'm a grandpa, but I'm going to have to learn how to do that. And you folks are going to be the ones who are going to help us do that and to make it simple for us to be able to do that and to still protect the assets that the grandkids have got that they literally don't realize are that important to protect today. So you've got a major responsibility here of not only in the FinTech industry of providing a safe product, but also of helping people learn how to use it safely and responsibly.
Well, Senator, I am sufficiently curious and you are sufficiently knowledgeable that we could go on all day, but I'm going to maybe ask you one last thing to reflect on. I mean, I don't spend as much time on the Hill as maybe I once did. But when I do, I would say that still, with respect to most of these issues, the dominant kind of reaction that I get when I talk about them is one of sort of deer in the headlights and, surely I should be retired before any of this matters. Come on. How do you speak to your colleagues about sort of the challenge of meeting the moment?
I think my colleagues probably understand the seriousness of it better than probably the American public might give them credit for. And this is probably a good time for me to just tell you, look, I know that in Washington, folks see it, but across the country, I think there's a sense that Republicans and Democrats just fight with one another. And on some things we do, but on the vast majority of things important in this country, we actually get along pretty well on. And we actually work together across the aisles on the vast majority of items that are really important. But it doesn't make the news. It's not exciting. And so what is highlighted in the news is where we have differing points of view or things that are salacious. What they don't see are the day-to-day folks that just have their head down, churning through the stuff, trying to write good legislation, modifying things, and working with their colleagues. And I would simply point out, founding fathers were brilliant in how they laid out a House and a Senate and a presidency. And they defined those three in such a fashion that there were checks and balances. They never wanted a hugely powerful federal government. They wanted one in which we had to work really hard to get anything done. And I think the Founding Fathers were right in the way that they approached it. I work with really good people, Republicans and Democrats. They care about the country, and they've got a tough job to do. But
I
there's
can't
good
think of a
hope.
better way to wrap up our time together. And when it comes to items that are salacious, I can think of no one better than Mark Zandi and Michael Barr, who will be up next. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.